All right, welcome to this panel, Let There Be Dragons. Welcome to this panel, Let There Be Dragons. I feel like I am myself a dragon because I have hoarded such an amazing collection of authors to talk about everyone's favorite topic, no, not Komodo. Let me take a moment to formally introduce everyone. We've got Ken Bebelle. He studied cybernetics at UCLA and has practiced prosthetics for over 20 years, specializing in upper limb prosthetics. He writes science fiction and fantasy with his co-author, Julia V. Their debut novel, Ebony Gate, an Asian-inspired urban fantasy, was published by Tor in summer of 2023, and book 2 in the series, Blood Jade, came out July 16th-ish, right? Yeah. So welcome, Ken. Jenn Lyons is the twice nominated Astounding Award finalist. She lives in Georgia with her husband, 3 cats, and a nearly infinite number of opinions on anything from mythology to the correct way to make a martini. You can read her 5-book debut epic fantasy series, A Chorus of Dragons, and the recently released novel, The Sky on Fire, available this month as well. You did just witness Christopher Pellini transform into Robin Hobb. Amazing bit of magic, definitely dragon magic. Robin Hobb is the New York Times bestselling fantasy author. She is published in English in the US, UK, and Australia, and her works have been widely translated. Her stories have been finalists for both the Hugo and Nebula Awards, as well as winning the Asimov's Readers Award. Her best-known series is the Farseer Trilogy, which includes Assassin's Apprentice, Royal Assassin, and Assassin's Quest. Robin, thank you so much for hopping in. They're disappointed, I can hear it. And last but certainly not least, Naomi Novik, special guest here, has written the Scholomance Trilogy, the novels Uprooted and Spinning Silver, and very topically, the Temeraire series. She is the founder of the Archive of Our Own. Her next book, Buried Deep in Other Stories, will be available in September, and she is currently working on some other projects as well. So thank you, Naomi, for being here. All right, so who am I? Good question, thank you. Yeah, I'm Matthew Berger. I'm the co-owner of Mysterious Galaxy here in San Diego. Very bad at personal promotion. So, growing up, my dad had a painting in his office by Michael Whelan. It was the cover for Sky Bowl, a novel by Melanie Ron, and it featured a golden dragon rider standing in front of his dragon. Its wings were outstretched, eyes looking straight at the viewer, its neck hung low like a hunting lioness. That, plus all the other Anne McCaffrey novels that were on the shelves, those are my first memories of dragons. So I wanted to hear from everyone, what is your first dragon memory? How did you get introduced to dragons?
So my first memory is the old cartoon of The Hobbit. We had a book that was literally this big at home that was based on the art from that cartoon, and there was a fold-out page, so it's basically this big, of Smaug breathing fire. And that was my first image of a dragon.
Awesome.
It has stuck with me ever since. I still have the book. And occasionally I take it down and look at it again.
Robin?
Oh, I think that my very first dragon was a Disney dragon, The Reluctant Dragon, which is the story of a dragon he wants to read poetry and have tea parties, and the young boy who's sent to slay the dragon, and it's still a very good cartoon. So, it was a nice introduction to dragons.
Imagine a 4-year-old girl in a movie theater in tears because Maleficent died. And I was so upset about that because that was the most wondrous, magnificent thing I'd ever seen. And that stupid prince. I've pretty much never recovered.
Dragons of Autumn Twilight. I'm still kicking myself to this very day that I let those books go at some point when I was cleaning my house, and I'm still looking for them again.
Adall.com. They found so many wonderful things for me.
Actually, what you were saying about the dragon who wants to read poetry reminded me of a different book that I read when I was like 12 or so called A Book Dragon. I've rarely seen this book. It's a very tiny little paperback, and it has little illustrations in the margin, and it's all about a dragon who's trying to find what his treasure should be and decides on an illustrated medieval manuscript and shrinks himself down small enough that he can hide inside the pages like one of the illuminations. Yeah, it's wonderful. It's a wonderful sort of little story that I just suddenly remembered. Now I'm going to have to hunt through every single shelf in my house until I find it again.
Find the author for us, yes.
Yeah.
So you all obviously don't just love looking at dragons. You have made it part of your life's work to write about and incorporate dragons into your creativity. But obviously dragons have a very long history and myth and literature from cultures around the world. So my question to all of you is, do you enjoy working within the established tropes and kind of preconceptions of what a dragon is? Or are you, as the kids say, unburdened by what has been? You are too online. We'll start with Robin.
Oh, with me?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Chris today. No. I am fascinated with the biology of such a creature. And so looking at it and trying, I was listening to Tim Powers saying, you will never get your dragons off the ground yesterday. But I think you simply have to give them sufficient wingspan and bird bones and things like that. So for me, it's trying to imagine the biology of an apex predator like that and try to fit them into a world where they would belong. So I guess I'm a little bit away. I'm not too close from traditional dragons, but not too far away either.
Yes.
You're a moderate dragon person. Jen, I know you have opinions on this.
I have opinions on everything. It's in my bio. I grew up in a mixed culture household with a Syrian stepfather, and so I grew up on stories about Tiamat, and who's not a dragon, by the way. She's the mother of dragons, but nothing in the Enuma Elish actually, she's never actually personally called a dragon. But Dungeons and Dragons made her a dragon, so I was there for it. And so I am, cultures all over the world have different takes on dragons, and they're all valid. And I like to know what all of those takes are, and I like to study every culture's interpretation of dragons, and then I do my own thing. So a little bit of all of the above.
What about you, Ken?
So when we started writing our books, we knew we wanted to incorporate Asian dragons, which are a completely different beast than European dragons. They're more revered as gods and considered to be benevolent and wise. And what our twist on it was we said, what if we have a group of people who have grown up around dragons for so much that it's like living next to a nuclear reactor. And they've actually started to take on traits of the dragons themselves, their powers and the abilities. And then they themselves become the treasure that the dragons want to collect and keep. So they've all become collectibles. And we kept mint in the box.
Gotta catch them all.
Yeah, I think, you know, one of the great pleasures for me of Temeraire, and why I kept going for 9 books, was that essentially I sort of wanted to think about dragons as having being participants in and having their own different cultures, which I then connected to the actual myths and legends from different cultures. So it's not that I posited particularly different biology for them. The dragons had a consistent biology, but their relationship with humans and the kinds of societies that they built, sometimes in opposition to humans, sometimes with humans, were all sort of different, partly inspired by the legends and myths of each culture. Because it is sort of interesting how universal the legend and the myth is. I feel like we all want to imagine a dragon, either as sort of an enemy to overcome or a magical creature to ride upon and share in its power, because it's just so satisfying.
So we'll stay with you, Naomi. It has been said that dragons are could be a stand-in for nuclear weapons today. Not just because of their
Godzilla, right? I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They mess things up when they get involved, oftentimes. But it's not just that they destroy everything, it's also the politics of brinksmanship and that kind of nuclear arms race that comes with them. So in writing the Temeraire series, where you put dragons into an alternate history of the Napoleonic Wars, how did the politics of dragons play into it? Like, did you think about that sort of brinksmanship, or how do dragons do that?
You know, with Temeraire, one of the things that I was trying to do was make the dragons a sort of coherent piece of the war. What I mean by that is I didn't want dragons to be incredibly overpowering, and I also didn't want them to be incredibly vulnerable. And so I built dragons that really fit into that era of the sailing ship and the cannon, before you have machine guns and missiles. I feel like it's a little hard to be a dragon with anti-aircraft missiles available. And because of that, because dragons were nevertheless really important in the war, that made them politically important and made their own politics. One of the challenges for army commanders to have to deal with. Suddenly your dragons decide they're going to unionize, and that's suddenly when you've been used to just sort of keeping them quiet with a cow or two, and suddenly they're like, well, actually, we want to be paid, and we want to be paid in enough shiny things that we can put it on ourselves and feel like we look cool. That becomes a challenge.
Did anyone else have a similar challenge, kind of wrapping the politics of their world around the potential of dragons?
Yeah, go.
Well, I mean, so for A Chorus of Dragons, I had from the very start had this idea that it was not a race, it was a curse, and dragons were effectively they were weapons of mass destruction. They were themselves walking inherent embodiments of gigantic, colossal destructive forces. So that was political in the same way a hurricane is political. But in the newest book I've come out with, The Sky on Fire, Naomi, I will specifically, I was like, because I love your books, I was like, you know what? What if the dragons weren't loyal?
Yeah.
What if they didn't bond? What if they knew exactly how much more powerful they were than the average human? How would that change the dynamic between them? What if they were every bit as smart as the smartest people, and they had magic, and they were dragon-sized, and they were fully aware of all of these things? Well, the dragons, the book went dark very quickly. And I was like, okay, I have to write this, because now you have a society where the dragons are actually in charge, and not the humans. They have writers, but the dynamic is flipped. And the writers are not writers because they've picked out a dragon, but the reverse. And that was really fun. And thank you, Naomi, for helping inspire that.
Good.
So when the Longjiaoren in my books, they model their lives after dragons, and they do it to an extreme, because you're talking about modeling your lives after, all-powerful weather gods. And so they live their lives in very unyielding, brutal fashion. And it's that kind of lifestyle that our main character has to grow up in, even though she feels like she was born with no magic at all. And so she's the outsider in a world that's very strict in its rituals and its expectations for who lives up to these kinds of, you have to be this kind of powerful in order to survive. And that was the thing that we played with as far as bringing dragons into how our people interacted with each other.
Within the extended world of the Farseers, one of the heroes, they're bringing dragons back from the brink of extinction. They haven't lived alongside humans in a very long time. So part of the fun I've been having with this is writing about creatures who are every bit as arrogant as human beings. And what happens when you take humanity with its arrogance and its territoriality, and you put it up against something that is bigger and just as arrogant and territorial. So I have a lot of fun with that.
That kind of answered my next question for you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Very sorry.
I was going to ask, how do you posit the relationship between individual dragons and humans in your story? Because that's one of my favorite things in dragon literature, is that sort of symbiotic or parasitic, or I don't know, a nuclear reactor is a good description for it.
I feel like we're all, at least for me, I know that I sort of grew up on Anne McCaffrey's books, right? And,
yes.
that sort of, I feel like that's the first thing that I remember reading, where the people were dragon riders, and you had that relationship. And that relationship is so satisfying. And I wonder if it's, it's sort of one of those sort of things where I keep wondering, has there been something about dragon riders before that? And I don't know of any. So I always throw this question out if anyone knows about something before. And I keep thinking that maybe, in a way, it's not coincidental that that story starts to be told after we have created nuclear weapons, after we have created, commercial airline, that we suddenly can imagine ourselves with that power. The dragons sort of move across that line from being just the enemy, just the monster to defeat, into the beings that you can imagine having a relationship with.
Well, I don't want to keep saying, well, in my books, but in my books, there are dragons that do have a personal affiliation with some humans, but it's definitely not a relationship of equals. And so it's great fun to write those. And I will also refer to Aragon by Chris Paolini if you want a story of the young man who rescues a dragon egg and what happens with that. And McCaffrey had this delightful thing where the dragons, as they hatched, as youngsters touched the eggs, sometimes those dragons would imprint as they were hatching. And that I thought was brilliant, because I keep chickens also, and chickens are little dragons, little dinosaurs.
Little T-Rexes.
Yes, they are. And I have personal relationships with my chickens, which are not the relationships between equals. So there's that.
I'm a little frustrated right now because I, of course, am not remembering any of the names. That would be very helpful. I did the research at one point. As I recall, one of the very first, what we would consider to be a modern dragon story, was in the 18th century, and by coincidence, it coincided with us starting to unearth really giant bones out of the ground. For whatever reason, but it was actually not an adversarial story. It was a very friendly story. It was very dragons and kids and very sweet. And like I said, I'm blanking on the name. I'm so sorry.
Huh? But at least now I know it exists. All right. Yeah.
Yeah. No. I mean and I keep wanting to think that you were talking about the reluctant dragon. But I don't want to be wrong. Like, that sounds like that's actually the right name for it, but Google, later, Google. So our first modern Western dragon story that we know of in the, not St. George and the Dragon or the Tarrasque kind of sense, was friendly, but it wasn't dragon riders. That was not an idea that occurred to anybody. So I think that's really interesting.
Robin, what you were saying about confronting your arrogant humans with arrogant dragons.
Yes.
That struck me because that's basically what we've been doing in our books, and it's been so much fun because in the first book, you're introduced to the people, but there are no dragons. But they are basically like apex predators amongst humans because of their powers. And then through the books, I get to introduce a few dragons, and it's not what they were expecting, right? It's a lot like when kids figure out that your parents aren't all powerful, and that they make mistakes, and that maybe they're kind of jerks sometimes too. And that's been a lot of fun to play with.
So,
Can I throw out another title here that
No.
just popped into my head?
yeah.
Tea with the Black Dragon by R.A. McAvoy, and that's an older one from, the 70s maybe? But well worth finding and reading, and that's all I'm going to say about it.
Thank you. Sorry, I was really just kidding, please. So, you guys are doing a really good job of preempting my questions. Ken, I was curious what it was like writing about dragons in absentia with Ebony Gate. Because it is such a dragon story because of the dragon magic. But did you find it hard? Were you tempted to bring the dragons in just to have that in earlier, to have them in there?
No, because we're very aware of the nuclear weapon problem, where if we brought it in too early, then there wouldn't be a whole lot more to go past that, because we thought about it, and then we figured out quickly that the only thing worse than one dragon is 3 or 4 dragons. And the book's not about dragons, it's about the people. And so we had to kind of pull back and hold off on that.
Is that like the Chekhov's dragon problem? Is that what you would call it?
Yes.
So Jenn, in both A Chorus of Dragons and The Sky on Fire, there's, I think, what you call the huge power iniquity between humans and dragons. And like you said, you like to invert that power iniquity. How challenging is it to write about stories from the perspectives of humans when they are at such a huge intellectual and physical and magical disadvantage to your dragons?
It's great fun. I mean, you're treating, I used to like to joke that particularly in A Chorus of Dragons, a lot of the dragons were basically kaiju, right? And this is because of Tolkien. You know, I mean, if you can't have a dragon that collapses and squashes a mountain, what, you know, that's just good fun. So, you know, it is a delight to write something that is not easily defeated by somebody on horseback with a lance. Mm-hmm. That's just, you know, I don't want to see the prince going and taking down Maleficent with a sword. It's just not fun for me. But at the same time, it makes you come up with different solutions, and I enjoy that.
It's very interesting to go back into your work and read Sleeping Beauty as the kind of skeleton key to everything. I'll have to reevaluate. So George R. R. Martin, who's also written about dragons, said, I wanted my dragons to be as real and believable as any creature could be. Yes, they fly and breathe fire, but four-legged animals only exist in heraldry. No animal that has ever lived on Earth had 6 limbs. Birds have 2 legs, 2 wings, bats the same, ditto pterodons, and other flying dinosaurs. So my question is, how much tension is there in the dragons that you guys write between realism and the fantastic? Do you ever feel the tug of realism in your fantasy when it comes to crafting a dragon?
You know, with Temeraire, I wanted the dragons to feel like real creatures. And so did a lot of work on kind of thinking about the physical limitations. And obviously, you know, the 4 versus 6 limb question is a reasonable one when you're thinking about, you know, how closely are you going to tie this to real creatures in the world. But I came down on the side of the 6-limbed because I think they're cooler. And I think that, you know, one of the pleasures and one of the powers of writing fantasy in general is that it gives you enormous control over the terms of engagement. You know, you really get to decide everything about your world. And as long as you sort of commit to certain aspects of it, I think you can make anything work as long as you're sort of clear-eyed about the decisions you're making. I think there's no reason why you can't make 6-limbed dragons as opposed to 4-limbed dragons feel real to the reader. It's more just, that's one choice that you make. And it's the sum total of the choices that you make about how you're depicting them, how people are interacting with them, that will make them feel real or not real. And sometimes you may not want them to feel real. Sometimes you may want them to feel like truly fantastical creatures. And that's an equally good story to tell because, you know, look, it's all made up. It's all made up.
I felt like, you know, biology is such a wonderful science. And if we can have a duck-billed platypus and we can have an octopus with 8 tentacles and lots of insects with 6 limbs, I didn't really feel too many qualms about giving dragons 6 limbs. So there was that. It's like if you're going to you play around with an imaginary creature, just feel free, you know.
Jen?
So insects are animals, and they're the largest biomass on Earth. Mm-hmm. I in my acknowledgments, of The Sky on Fire, I thank 2 authors. One is, of course, Anne McCaffrey, because her Dragon Riders of Pern books were a huge impetus to writing The Sky on Fire. And the other person was George R. R. Martin, because I did a lot of things in The Sky on Fire to spite that statement that he made. Including, you know, making most of the life forms on the planet in which the story takes place hexapodal. So that, you know, because why not have that be a thing? That said, authors are allowed to make any statements they want within their books and have those things be true. And in George R. R. Martin's books, his dragons have 4 limbs, and I respect that. Absolutely is his right to say that that is what those are. Just like I think that it's perfectly valid for, say, Asian dragons to have no wings at all, and that is, those are dragons, and that is completely valid. I admit my dander a little bit up in a rough when somebody tries to tell me what my dragons are. so that's why George got thanked. But yeah, no, I put a lot of work into it. I put a ton of work into it because I enjoy it. That's just a world building I really enjoy. Possibly the hardest bit of world building I ever had to do anywhere was trying to figure out how fast a 20-ton, 6-legged animal runs. It turns out when paleontologists figure that out for dinosaurs, they use calculus, and nobody warned me about that. So that was a thing.
I think one of the best things about writing and writing fantasy specifically is that we get to be the lords of our worlds, right? And we get to say, these are the rules, and you can't break them. I might be able to break them, but only on occasion. And I think the thing that I feel that goes towards making the dragons feel real is really about making them another character, right? And they have, they might be all-powerful weather gods, but they still have wants and needs too. And you just have to get those across to the reader so that when the dragon feels like they have to, bring a monsoon to San Francisco and flood the whole town, that it makes sense.
As a surprise to everyone, Mr. Martin is here, would like to respond. No, I'm just kidding. I think maybe the most honest bit of world building in fantasy is what you said, Naomi, which is, it's just cool. Like, that is, I think, a good reason for a lot of things that happen in fantasy, which is what makes it so fun. So I've got...
The other piece that I wanted to just add was the one other thing, based on what you were saying, Jen, is it is important to also let go, as a writer, of the need to get it, quote unquote, right. There is no right. There's only, can you make this into a wonderful story? Yeah. Right? And it's okay if you make dragons with like 9 limbs and, unicorn horns on their heads. Great. As long as it's a wonderful story, as long as it feels alive. That's what really matters. And to do that, what's most important is for the dragon to be alive in you, in your imagination. Because once if it's alive and working in you, then that's what's right. And that's what makes it take fire.
I'm going to be trying to figure out where that extra limb goes. But yeah, I've got 2 more questions, just fun questions, and then we'll have some time for audience questions, but I doubt anyone here has a question, so I can keep going. But I think that will be, I don't know what the procedure is, but there's a microphone, so when I say so, fight over it. If you could choose to have one power from a dragon from your own work or another mythos, what would it be and why?
I mean, Timur's divine wind is pretty good, I feel like, but I don't quite see how I would have that in my own body as opposed to.
It's just cool.
Yeah, right. There you go.
Well, wasn't it Anne McCaffrey's dragons that could kind of wink out and appear in another?
Yes.
Yep.
I want that.
Yes.
I mean, that's strong. Mm-hmm. That's
Yeah.
strong.
Going between.
Go back through time and wreak all kinds of havoc. That would be great. There's a lot of dragons that shape change. That'd be pretty cool.
with weather control, I could bring in a fog bank and cool everything down right around the convention center.
You win.
Yep, you win.
What is, last but not least, what is a book that you would recommend to someone to get to know you? Something that is an text or just that is important to you that you think people should read?
A Wizard of Earthsea.
Damn it.
Sorry.
No. Tombs of Atuan.
Okay, there we go.
I'll go for The Last Unicorn, Peter S. Beagle.
Nice, yeah. Nice.
The Greenbone Saga. She did everything I'm trying to do, but just didn't put in dragons.
All right. Does anyone in the audience have a question? If so,
So first, I just like to say that I looked up the Wikipedia. The Reluctant Dragon is a 1898 children's story by Kenneth Graham. It can be seen as the prototype to most modern stories in which the dragon is a sympathetic character rather than a threat. So there you go.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, so my quick question is, so we've been discussing dragons of different stripes and colors. What would you say is like the MDU, the minimal dragon unit to qualify something as a dragon? Like, are fire lizards from Anne McCaffrey's count as dragons? Like, what is a dragon? What would you say isn't a dragon? What is the MDU of dragons?
I don't think I understand the question.
Well, because so clearly some things are dragons and some things aren't dragons, right? Like, like a fox is not a dragon. But you've been describing that, there's things that, can you really put dragons in a box? What would you define the minimal box as? The minimal thing that,
Minimum qualifying dragon, right?
Yeah.
Lowest common denominator dragon.
Like, what qualities do you need to be a dragon? If you don't have this, you aren't a dragon.
No.
Or a set of qualities, or fuzzy sets of qualities.
It's hard to make a dragon that can't fly. It doesn't have to have wings, but I feel like if it doesn't fly, it's not really a dragon.
Except,
Right?
I mean, like the French Tarrasque didn't fly, but
Yeah.
it's still a dragon.
I'd let Komodo dragons in for sure.
See, I don't think that that's like I can say what I consider to be a minimal basic qualifier for dragons in my worlds, but I couldn't proclaim that to be a blanket. Here's what it is for everyone else, because everyone else makes their own rules.
Does it maybe have to inspire awe or fear to be a dragon?
But the book dragon. Right?
Toothless says no.
But he started out inspiring fear.
Okay, fair.
thank you for your question and thank you for the fact checking.
Hello. What? We've talked about all types of dragons, but we seem to have missed talking about one certain type of dragon. The friendly type. Like Dragon Tales, Jane and the Dragon, Quest for Camelot. The first dragon I was introduced to was in preschool. A big green level we got called the Lollipop Dragon. And we're talking slides and cassette tapes for audio here, real old. So my question to you is, do you really think those dragons belong with the rest of them, or do you think they're a disgrace to their race?
I think they all, yes, but obviously I think, one of the things is, right, that dragons, when you create any character, any kind of dragon, it exists in relationship to all the other dragons. And one of the pleasures of having a cute, sort of cuddly dragon is that you have that contrast in your mind that you can enjoy of, the terrible fire-breathing dragon on the other side. And then it's like, oh, but this one's small and cute.
Oh, consider the fire lizards of Anne McCaffrey.
Yeah.
I need little dragons that sing. Oh, these are nice.
I desperately wanted one when I was a kid.
Yes.
Yeah, so why are so many of your dragons jerks? Come on.
Temeraire is not a jerk.
Oh, okay. I said so many, not
Well,
all
so many
of
of my dragons are jerks, and they are. So many of them are because, okay. So you talk first, because I'm trying to keep my story and I don't think I'm going to succeed. So go.
My dragons are jerks because a lot of my characters are jerks, and they needed the comeuppance.
Yeah.
So 12-year-old me would have said no. Dragons, they're a disgrace. I remember being asked to draw a dragon for the girls' club I was a part of, and of course I drew Tiamat because I am who I am. And they're like, well, we thought you would draw a cute dragon. And I said, dragons are cute. But I have come around, right? Dragons are allowed to be cute. It's okay. So no, they're part of the club. It's good.
All right. Thank you.
Well, now going to the direct opposite with the terrifying dragons. As a lot of people in stories get terrified when they see a dragon, but what would you guys say is the most terrifying aspect of it? Is it the teeth, the eyes, the build, or is it the sense of power and that we might be so useless against them?
What is the seed of terror
Yeah.
in a dragon?
I think in the Temeraire books, it's largely a sense of the vulnerability, relative vulnerability, partly because at one point I was doing research for Empire of Ivory and had the very good luck of going on a safari, and went on a walking safari one day with a guide, and we were out in the wilderness, and suddenly our guide went like this, and we were like, what's going on? And he pointed, and basically imagine the distance to the other end of the convention hall. And we could see about this big, 5 little heads just looking at us. And he was like, the lions aren't where they're supposed to be. And so we were like, what do we do? And he's like, we walk very slowly the other way. And suddenly it's that sense of, oh wow, this could just kill me and eat me. And I think that is a very sort of natural fear, that's a very instinctual fear that we have, that's very easy to not have when, for instance, you're seeing a creature in a zoo, on the other side of a pane of glass or in an enclosure, or watching on TV. You don't feel it, and then suddenly you're like, oh wait, no, it's really right there. And it could just decide to come this way. And that fear, I think, is, for me at least, for the Temeraire dragons, was sort of the seed of what made people afraid.
I think a dragon's ability to breathe fire, or in the case of my dragons, to spit acid, I think that would be terrifying, because that's a distance weapon, and you don't have much defense against that except run.
I think a lot of our relationships with dragons reflect our relationship with nature. And I think it's really interesting from that perspective, to look at the Western relationship versus the Eastern relationship, and how we view dragons. In both cases, they are potentially very destructive, but it's a completely different way of viewing it. Something to be conquered versus something and defeated versus something that is potentially much more benevolent. So I do think that with dragons, a lot of it is that idea of things that are beyond our control, and that is both the good and the bad of dragons, right?
Yeah, you touch on the same thing I was going to say. It's very much like when you're confronted with an earthquake or a really bad thunderstorm, if you've never been in one, and it's just so big and so world encompassing, and all you can do is hope that you survive it.
But they're also so cool.
Yes.
Thank you. We've got time for one more question.
I'll make it quick. Howdy. As far as y'all's writing goes, what makes dragons more appealing subject matter as opposed to other mythical creatures like griffins, lion dogs, or unicorns?
I'm here wearing a unicorn little top here,
so
actually.
cute.
So I feel like there's nothing. It's more, dragons are just really, really cool.
I think I'm just going to have to go with that. Dragons are really, really cool.
Well, here's where I make a confession, which is that when I was a little girl, I was terribly bullied by a bunch of girls that really, really, really were into unicorns. As an adult, I have nothing against unicorns. It's fine. But as a kid, my logic was dragons eat unicorns. I've never been able to completely shake it. Again, no problem with unicorns.
And to be fair, we in our books we do use fu lions and qilin and kitsune and hibagan and tengu and so we wanted to kind of canvas all of it, but dragons are really cool.
Thank you so much.
That is the perfect place to end. Let me just